Hi, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. I'm your host, Becca. I'm a certified personal trainer, holistic health coach, and future chiropractor on my way to figuring out this thing we called life. Now, let's get babbling. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. This week, we've got another episode all about gut health. I'm excited to dive into this one because this one is going to be all about a major digestive issue that a lot of people deal with, and they think it's normal and they just need to pop some pill to make it better, when in actuality it might be doing more harm than good. And I'm talking all about gastric reflux, or GERD, indigestion, whatever term that is familiar to you. That's what we're talking about today, and how using things called PPIs, or proton pump inhibitors, or maybe using something called Tums, how that could actually be doing more harm than good. This episode is going to break down what exactly are proton pump inhibitors, what exactly is GERD, how PPIs are affecting your health, and what to actually do about it instead. I know it can really suck to have gastric reflux, and it's like, what am I supposed to do if this only thing is going to give me relief, that now you're telling me I can't take this anymore? And that's not going to be the case. I'm actually going to give you some actionable steps that you can use to actually improve your health, not just only in the short term, but in the long term as well. So, GERD is not really an acid issue. Many people think because they hear gastric reflux or acid reflux that it means that we have too much stomach acid. In actuality, it's not an acid issue. It's actually what's called an esophageal sphincter issue. So, when you eat something, you chew it in your mouth and it goes down your throat. Down your throat, or in your throat, is something called your esophagus. It's basically a tube that connects your mouth to your stomach, so then we can start the breakdown process of digestion. Now, the way that the body makes sure is that things don't get in different chambers of your body before it needs to, or before it's ready, is it basically has this sphincter that's kind of like a trap door that allows things to go in and out. But it also keeps things from coming in and out. So your stomach has a lot of acid in it, and it's actually really important that we have acid in our stomach so we can actually break down our food, so later we can absorb all the nutrients that you just ate. What can happen, though, is that if the sphincter is either too relaxed or too weak due to diet and lifestyle issues, you can start having that acid start to come up. So then the quick fix there is to dilute the acid, right? It's because you have too much acid being produced. That's not actually the case. When we overfill our stomach and get really stuffed, or we eat really late at night and then immediately lay down on our bed, or we eat really high fat foods, alcohol, tobacco, or are really sensitive to histamines, things like gastric reflux can really start to happen within our body, because our sphincter isn't able to manage what we are putting in our body. So, what's commonly prescribed? PPIs to decrease the acid that is in your stomach. But within all of my research, I actually found that PPIs aren't only used for decreasing acid. It's actually prescribed for a lot of things. So a lot of the times, when we take certain medications or pain relievers, PPIs will be prescribed on the side of that to decrease the risk factors of other issues. So, for instance, a lot of elderly tend to have increased risk of fractures or arthritis, and they're trying to manage pain. So, we prescribe things like NSAIDs or ibuprofen and stuff like that. Well, that can increase our risk for ulcers. And so PPIs can be prescribed for that. Same thing with a low dose aspirin. A lot of the times we're trying to prevent coronary artery disease, or preventing a stroke. And so PPIs will be prescribed because they're trying to decrease any sort of upper GI ulcers, GI bleeding, or any breakdown that would happen in the lining of your stomach. But interestingly enough, because you are prescribing those PPIs, you can also develop ulcers because of taking too many PPIs. But the biggest reason why I wanted to do this podcast was to highlight how PPIs are kind of like this vicious cycle of you take something to prevent something, but then it's just like leaving this trail of like making things worse. And that's because it really disrupts your microbiome in your gut. So we talked about a couple of weeks ago about your gut microbiome and how it's filled with a ton of different bacteria, and you need that bacteria to be able to absorb different nutrients and to feel good and to not feel bloated or gassy or any other lingering symptoms that you might have. What ends up happening with PPIs is they start to disrupt your gut microbiome because it starts to dilute the acid within your stomach. So your normal pH in your stomach should be about 1 to 2. You want your stomach to be really acidic. And this is because not only does your stomach break down food, but your stomach will make sure that any sort of pathogens or any unwanted bacteria doesn't get past your stomach. So it has to kill it off. Well, if your pH starts to increase to like a 4 to a 6, which tends to happen with PPIs, then those bacteria that you don't want passing your stomach end up being able to survive. So then you might have more gastric reflux, or you might have more bloating or more constipation because now you're dealing with bacteria that is causing an environment that isn't great for you and your gut. And so they actually did a study where they were testing people who take PPIs versus the one that didn't, and they found that the people who took PPIs ended up having more oral bacteria in their large intestine, and compared to the ones who just had a normal gut bacteria. And you would think like, oh, like this should be fine, like my mouth is still a part of my body and it's okay. But your body has different types of microbiomes, and you want to keep it that way because the things that your mouth do are different versus the things that your gut should be doing. And then also, if you think about it, if you have inflamed gums, let's say you go to the dentist and like they tell you like, "Hey, have you been flossing?" and you have those bleeding gums. Hopefully you don't have bleeding gums, but if you do, then it's like that's going to be the same microbiome that's going to be in your gut if you're constantly taking PPIs. And then on top of that, if you're taking PPIs on top of NSAIDs, that's just causing even more dysbiosis or less beneficial bacteria in your digestive system, which is not what you're wanting if you're trying to heal your gut. This can also cause an increase in risk of SIBO. So SIBO is basically when you start getting bacteria in your small intestine, and this is like I said because your stomach doesn't have that defense that it usually uses to then keep away all that bacteria. So that bacteria is going to go somewhere, which is going to be your small intestine. And then you're going to have things like not being able to absorb your food very well. So then you're going to be dealing with fatigue, or you're going to be dealing with constant bloating because that bacteria is just sitting there and then you're not able to break down that food. In addition to that, you're not going to be able to produce a ton of short chain fatty acids, which help to increase your energy and decrease inflammation. So you're basically dealing with this fighting battle of you don't have the bacteria that you need, and then you don't have the energy on top of it to do the things that you need to do. And then in addition to that, you'll have a lower amount of bifidobacteria and lactobacteria, which are the good bacteria that you want in your gut. And then interestingly, something can happen called translocation. So this is basically where bacteria move from one part of your body to another part of your body through the bloodstream. So because you lost that acid barrier, pathogens are able to move back and forth. So things like C. diff, and pneumonia, things like that, they can be cause you to be at an increased risk to developing things like diarrhea or other infections because that bacteria is now going from your gut to another part of your body. So basically, everything is going to start in your gut, and you'll just be dealing with this fighting battle of trying to increase your immune system and maybe taking a ton of zinc, and you're like, I don't understand why I still feel so crappy or I keep getting sick all the time. It's probably because you're dealing with a gut issue and not really a I just need to build up my immune system. So it always comes back to the gut. Now, I know I had mentioned that with the SIBO that you can have malabsorption, or you're not going to be able to absorb nutrients as well. Not only is it because of the SIBO, but it's because you're not able to break down the food as well. So your stomach is a protector, is basically a part of your immune system to make sure any pathogens don't get through. But it also breaks down and it also starts to absorb protein. So what happens is you have these cells in your stomach called parietal cells and chief cells. Your parietal cells release something that allows for the chief cells to then release acid. And um, so the parietal cells release something called trypsinogen, and then the chief cells release. Oh, wait, sorry, I flipped that. The chief cells release trypsinogen, and the parietal cells release acid. And what ends up happening is those come together and they activate something called trypsin. Trypsin is then going to break down the protein that is in your stomach. So if you've ever tried to eat like a steak, or you hear people say like you need to increase your protein intake, and you're like, I always feel so crappy when I eat protein and I don't understand why. It might be because you don't have enough acid in your stomach to then activate the enzyme that then starts breaking down that protein, so then you can absorb it later and actually use the amino acids that you ate. So if you're dealing with indigestion and it constantly comes from you eating a high protein meal, this might be the case that you're dealing with a low acid issue and you just think like, oh, I just need to keep popping in those Tums because you're dealing with indigestion. Another thing that it can cause malabsorption with is things like calcium. You'll not be able to absorb that as well. The same thing with magnesium and iron, and B12 is a big one. So going back to those parietal cells also release something called intrinsic factor. This is an important chemical that is released from those parietal cells because this allows you to absorb that B12. So you may be taking a ton of B12 supplements and thinking like, "Oh, I need more energy. I'm low in B12. I want to feel better." And you keep taking this B12 and then you're like, "I don't feel like anything's changing. I feel like I just have this expensive urine," and you're getting frustrated. Again, it might not be a you're not eating enough B12. It might be a you're not able to absorb that B12 because your body isn't producing the chemicals or releasing those chemicals that allow you to absorb that B12. And it kind of sucks if you're out there buying the supplements for B12 and then you're not getting the benefits from it. That's really frustrating. So, what are we going to do instead? Well, I know I kind of like said a ton of things that like might make PPIs seem really scary. And I just want you guys to be informed that PPIs are a short-term fix. They're not all bad. Let's say like you're dealing with some really bad indigestion. You're like, I just feel like I'm suffering throughout my day. I'm not saying you can never have a Tum the rest of your life, but if you feel like you have to take them like M&Ms, you're not fixing the problem. You need to go through um, a long-term process to actually fix the issue, or you're just going to end up with more problems later on. So indigestion is really uncomfortable. And so I want to give you guys some things to help understand what you can do to actually prevent indigestion. So this can start by starting having smaller meals. When you have really heavy meals and you're dealing with indigestion, that can be really hard on your body. But I also want to be wary that like maybe smaller meals might not be the thing for you because I know some clients, they would deal with indigestion and they would start doing smaller meals. And they were like, yeah, this isn't helping. And it's because you're constantly then having to like produce that acid, and then your sphincter isn't like able to handle all of that. And that's totally fine. We're just going to see how your body's going to react. Be a scientist, kind of figure out like, okay, how do I feel when I eat smaller meals? Try it for 3 weeks, see what happens. If you're not seeing any benefit, then okay, try and have 3 big meals throughout the day and space them out. Your body may just need to produce all of that acid in the beginning, and then have that time to like rest, relax, and then have your next meal again. But I will say, whatever size meal that you have, make sure that it's going to regulate your blood sugar well. So having a balanced plate, we're going to have our protein, we're going to eat it first, and then you're going to have some sort of fat, veggie, and carbohydrate on that meal that's going to sustain your energy and help regulate your blood sugar, so then your body's not all out of whack and you're dealing with even more inflammation that may cause issues later on. If you're that person who's like, man, it really sucks eating a high protein meal. I hate eating high protein because it really hurts my digestion. Try having some small apple cider vinegar right before a meal. Like when I do this, I literally get a shot glass and I just pour like about a tablespoon. You can start even less because I know it can be really hard to start out with. And then put some water in it and then just like shoot it back. And then wait for a little bit and then have your meal that you're about to eat. And then you might find that um it's easier for you to eat those higher protein meals. And this is because you're telling your body to already start producing those enzymes that will help break down that protein, especially if you're dealing with lower acid issues. Now, another thing is that our body needs to be prepared for the food that we're about to eat. So, take a few breaths, calm down, stop eating at your desk, stop eating while you're doing work, and like take a few breaths and actually enjoy the food that is in front of you. Put on a podcast, put on an audiobook. I've been really enjoying listening to the Throne of Glass series while I'm eating my food, and just like slowing down and enjoying the food that you just made or the food that you just ordered, whatever it is, being grateful for what's in front of you. Another thing that you can do to prevent indigestion is to go on a 5 to 10 minute walk right after meals. It doesn't have to be anything big. You don't have to get a giant sweat on, but once you start moving, it helps your body start that digestion process and just get it moving a little bit easier. You're basically just supporting your system to help it get moving, and it typically feels better on people who are dealing with digestive issues. So I know sometimes it can suck feeling that cramping feeling, but just like push through for the first like 2 or 3 minutes, and then typically it tends to ease down. Another thing that you can do is stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. It's really hard on your system, especially if you're dealing with reflux issues, to immediately just go horizontal. Because when you go horizontal, you're basically making it even harder for that sphincter that's in your esophagus to stay closed, especially if it's a little bit weaker. Um, because then it has to really work with like gravity to like keep it down. So make sure you eat 2 to 3 hours before bed so that like everything can get digested. And then when you go to sleep, you're not like burping anything up. And then another thing I would have you look into is maybe going low histamine for a little bit, doing like a low FODMAP diet or some elimination diet. Don't go on this forever. Just do it for a little bit. And then you can do it for like three weeks. Do it for 3 weeks, see how you feel. If your reflux symptoms decrease, that's great. Then slowly start to introduce foods again. And then highlight like, okay, is anything giving me issues? Those are then your trigger foods. Now you know what is going to typically cause your symptoms. And your body may need a little bit of a reset. So go on that elimination diet. And then what you're going to do is you're going to add in a probiotic. You're going to start adding in 2 or 3 veggies a day. Making some sort of variety so then we can start producing those short chain fatty acids again, and we can start building that bacteria up in your gut so your gut can start to heal. Taking something like glutamate is really great to help heal that gut lining if you're dealing with gut lining issues, but honestly, you don't really have to take anything besides a really good probiotic and then increasing your fruits and veggies and maintaining your blood sugar with those balanced meals. I'd also challenge you to add new spices. That's a great way to change up your gut flora, is by adding in a new spice. I love going to Trader Joe's, and my favorite one currently is that umame seasoning that they have. But they always got the fun little containers, and so I don't always continue to buy the little containers, but then you can go to Costco and get the big one, and then you just fill up the tiny little fun containers. And then you have this awesome spice cabinet, and you just get one every single time you go there, and then you're like, I am a chef. So change it up with the spices. That's another way to bring good gut bugs into your gut lining. Now, lastly, I want to talk about what happens when you do have indigestion, because it will happen. You will have flare-ups, and that's okay. That's what happens when you are trying to understand your body and learn things. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean that you messed up. It's oh, okay, that may be a trigger food. I may be more stressed than I typically am. So how are we going to calm down the system so then we can start building it back up again? So when you're dealing with indigestion, if you already did that elimination diet and you know what your trigger foods are, boom, okay, we're eliminating those trigger foods because we're already in a really inflamed state and you're dealing with some reflux issues. So let's tamper it down for a bit and give our body some rest so we can reset a bit. You can also have ginger tea and peppermint tea. That's great for just calming down the system. I love the ginger chews that you can get. I forget what they're called. I'll try and look it up and see if I can put it in the podcast description. Those are really great to, again, just chill down the system. And then another great thing that I found was if you take just a few drops of slippery elm, you can do just a couple of teaspoons and you can put it in a glass of water. And this helps just coat your stomach lining and then also your esophagus to kind of give yourself some relief when it comes to reflux issues. So I know reflux is not fun. And I know it can be super easy to just want to be able to pop a pill and just make yourself feel better. But it typically ends with consequences later on down the road. So if you really want to get this figured out and you want to solve your problems, start working on some of these things. Start creating a blood sugar balanced meal. Start with either small meals or 3 big meals throughout your day. Start adding in that ACV and start going on small walks right after meals. You don't have to do everything though. Start with one thing, and then the next month you can add another thing. I don't want you to get too overwhelmed, but come up with a plan so then you know what to do, and then you won't just always revert back to taking those Tums that you've typically been taking. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can message me on Instagram at Becca Ann Wellness, or you can email me at beccababbles.podcast@gmail.com. And if this podcast helped you, please rate it with a 5-star review and share it with people that you think it would be helpful with. I'd love to help everyone who is dealing with reflux issues. And if you have any other questions, like I said, reach out to me. I'd love to help you. And with all that being said, I can't wait to babble with you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Becca Babbles podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing that you can do is leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other listening platform of your choosing. If you want to learn more about me, you can do that by following me on Instagram at Becca Ann Wellness, or by checking out my blog, freebies, offers, and newsletter on my website at beccaannwellness.com. If you want to share the love of the podcast, you can do that by taking a screenshot and sharing it on social media and tagging me and the podcast at Becca Ann Wellness and using the hashtag Becca Babbles Podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to babble with you next time.